अस्सलाम everyone, मेरा नाम है Nitasha और मैं हूँ शाम की चाय की host where I interview really cool Pakistanis all over the world. हमारा नया segment called Chai Chats are a series of virtual interviews where me and a specific Pakistani dives really deep on a particular topic. And today on our show we have Sana Nasir, who is an illustrator. She is an art director for Cape Mons Records. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. Yes,
awesome. And her handle is Koi Nahi. For those of you that have been following her, I've been following her for many years, and she's extremely talented. And I'm very excited to have her on the show. Thank you so much for joining us, Sana.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you, and I'm very excited about this topic because when we were discussing earlier, you told me about something that I didn't know that was happening, and it was about this counterculture movement in Pakistan. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that is and what it's trying to do?
Counterculture movement in Pakistan is happening in a lot of ways. It's happening on a very non-traditional spaces. It's happening in the music industry, it's happening in art, it's happening in design, it's happening in film, where you're getting like this newer generation of creators, and they are trying to tell their stories with as much honesty as possible. While moving away from traditional ways of storytelling, while moving away from traditional ways of making music or displaying their work or speaking to people or even learning.
Really interesting. So can you talk a little bit about...
I mean, I can show you examples too. But...
Yeah, we're gonna get into examples. Before we dive into one particular example that was spearheaded by you, I'd love to learn a little bit more about how Western influence or colonialism specifically shows up in artistic spaces in Pakistan. Like, what should we be looking out for when we're looking at a particular piece of creative work coming out of Pakistan to detect a Western influence?
So there's two sides to this. There are designers and creators who are creating traditional work, but for the Western gaze, and not so much for the local people. Mm-hmm. And it's very sort of stereotyped. It's very yeah, that's what I would say. It was very stereotyped. It's very like, oh, this can only happen in like a Pakistani setting or a South Asian setting, or let's emphasize a few things about us that are cultural, like Mughal miniature style. I feel like or truck art. I feel like it's been done to death. But then again, if you are creating truck art and you come from a privileged background, truck art is traditionally the kind of artwork that is done on trucks by working class people. They have their own style that they have developed over years and years, over practice. The kind of colors they use, kind of strokes they use, the kind of visual language that they have. When you see someone who comes from a privileged background trying to emulate that or trying to like put that into their work just to get that kind of attention that, okay, this work is now internationally representing Pakistan, I feel like that's a kind of colonialism. Use this person's culture and history and work, and in a way that doesn't benefit them at all, like erases them completely from the picture.
Right.
So there is that, and then you have the kind of art that is very westernized. It does not look like it's been made in Pakistan at all. People are very proud of that. It goes from everything to like billboards, to product labels, to clothing, to illustrations. The style is very alien to Pakistani sensibilities. And a lot of it is turning towards manga as well, which is a great style to work in. But I think with the whole like wave of K-pop and the influence of anime, a lot of I've seen some students of mine trying to emulate that, and without understanding where it's coming from, without doing the study for it, without thinking that if this is the only style that they are going to explore and no other style, or whatever they're good at, or whatever their capacity is, they're going to lose out and erase an entire history and erase an entire heritage and erase an entire lifetime of study. When you travel anywhere, there's always like this hesitancy in like telling people that you're Pakistani because of how you might be judged, especially since 9/11, especially because of Islamophobia. Now I feel like people are beginning to reclaim that identity. Like, yes, I am Pakistani. And then it's been so great for me because when I travel and I tell people I'm Pakistani, they're like, oh, we love Coke Studio, you know? And
yeah.
what do you call it? And they'll start singing to me like I'm trying to buy something. I'm trying to bargain with a shopkeeper, and then they'll start singing Nusrat Fateh Ali song to me or Atif Aslam to me, and I'm just like, oh, thank you. I will take it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like that's a nice thing that's happening now that wasn't happening so much when I was a teenager or when I was growing up, where you were hesitant to tell people about who you are. But
yeah,
the arts, I think, are really pushing back.
Yeah, I feel that, and I see that too. I mean, I grew up in Vancouver. I now live in San Francisco, and so it is, much more comfortable to say, "Hey, I'm Pakistani now." Although I was still very Pakistani growing up, but there was just a little bit of a hesitation there. You've been doing so much for this counterculture movement. I want to dive into, one of your pieces of work and kind of do a quick case study on it. So you made a boiler room logo that was, encompassed a lot of iconography and just visually very relevant to Pakistan. And so before we dive into the logo itself, tell me about the boiler room broadcast and what it meant for Pakistan.
So my job was I think it was the first time that I got really nervous while making artwork because usually I'm really excited. I love doing illustrations. I love designing. But this time I was like, okay, I am now for the first time representing Pakistan on this platform. It's the first time Boiler Room is happening in Pakistan. It's the first time a lot of these artists are going to get that kind of what do you call it, attention from this international community. And so I felt a lot of responsibility, and I felt like, oh God, anything I make is going to then represent Pakistan. And while I was doing it, from the Boiler Room, what do you call it? The organization themselves, they were like, oh, just make something that's typically Pakistani. And that is so difficult. Like, how do you define what's typically Pakistani? We have several languages, we have several kind of cuisines, we have several kinds of different stories and people and dresses. It's not easy to just define Pakistani as just one thing.
Right.
And I think what they were hinting towards was that, just put green in it. And I felt like that that would have been a huge insult to us, because anytime anything Pakistani comes up, the most typical thing to do is just turn it green. Our national soda is green, our flag is green, our cricket kit is green. So I felt like that was really lazy. And I think a lot of people would have hated me for it. Right. So yes, I made a green option, but then I also then really thought about who we are as Pakistanis and what we want and what we're trying to say with this broadcast coming out for the first time from this country. And to me, I started going back into like this place of love. And I think it came from the influence of seeing roses. Roses are such a part of our visual identity. You see roses at funerals, you see them at weddings, you see them on the back of trucks, you see them everywhere. Roses are like an identity for us, on Eid cards, on clothing. And it's because we're romantic people. And Pakistanis internationally are not known as that. We're not known as romantic people. We're not known as people of love. We're known popularly as terrorist sympathizers or terrorists. And I thought that was very unfair. And so for me, it was very important to show that side of us where we are trying to just put love out into the world, to tell people that this is who we are. I took this line that you see a lot on trucks called Dekh Magar Pyar Se, look but with love. And there were a lot of elements that I wanted to put in, but eventually there was only so much space because the logo had to be shrunk into a tiny icon as well, and then blown up as well. So I had to like choose from all those things. I had initially I had even made a reference to a folktale, Soni Mahiwal, which had to do with Chenab River and how like these two lovers were torn apart. And obviously, like every folktale, it's a sad love story.
The Par Chanade
I connected
one, right?
it to climate change, where there were a lot of floods. Yes. And also in the artwork was like this reference to climate change and how floods were happening in Pakistan because of the melting of the rapid melting of glaciers. So there were a lot of things happening in there. Eventually had to cut it down to like just a few simple ideas. So I made it ended up being a very, I suppose, 90s BTV kitsch image of a sparkling rose surrounded by the words "Dekh Magar Pyar Se" and boiler room. And I think my favorite comment that I got back from that was someone said that I'm so glad I have a T-shirt to wear that represents Pakistan that isn't the Pakistani cricket kit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. Thank you so much for
the rose became like a symbol for Pakistani.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you so much for going through that case study and sharing all of that with us. I'm sure, you know, I'm gonna link. I'm gonna put a link into the Instagram and YouTube comments directly to the post that you posted on Instagram, so people can see the logo themselves. Before we wrap up, any advice for new creatives coming into the Pakistani, creative scene, aspiring illustrators or art directors? What can they do to be part of this counterculture narrative?
Well, so how I started was I just started paying attention to what people my age were doing around me. And I think a lot of it had to do with my friends who were involved in music, were involved in art. I have a really good friend, Samia Arif, who got me into artwork for music. And I feel like once I started doing that, I started really enjoying, because I always wanted to make music, and I'm completely talentless in the music field. But I love the music. I love the fact that this thing exists, and me creating artwork for that is just like my way of being a part of it, being like, I'm also part of this thing. Even though I don't make many music, but also being art director for a record label, I'm so lucky. I get to experience so much different kind of music. A lot of this is very grassroots level. A lot of it is bedroom producers. A lot of it is not mainstream. Most of it is not mainstream. And that's where you really get a sense of who people are when you're not listening to something that's popular or not watching something that's popular. These are real thoughts and feelings of people who are driving through Seaview. These are the real thoughts and feelings of people who are going through a breakup in this day and age, being a Pakistani, being a Muslim, being a minority, being alive at this time in this world. So I feel like the insights I've gotten from this, those are just incredible. And my advice to like anyone who's aspiring to be an art director is just to look around and see what interests you. Look around and see how you can elevate people. Look around and see how you can add your voice with their voice. If your thing is not art direction, maybe it's packaging. Look at the packaging we have in Pakistan. Some of it is so inspiring. Like I have this book called Mazar Bazaar, which was a great publication by Oxford University Press, and it catalogs so much of our history of advertising and history of packaging and history of poster art. And it's so inspiring to see the kind of designs that came out of Pakistan, that are still coming out of Pakistan, that are unique to this space, that are not. So the most confusing part for a lot of people is how to make something look Pakistani or seem Pakistani without it seeming Indian or Arab.
Right.
Because we're at such a unique point geographically and also culturally. How do we make something Pakistani? So, for example, like my grandmother has these saris that she passed on to my mother. My mother wore them. She passed them on to me. But if you put a brown woman in a sari, immediately the first thing someone's going to think is that they are Indian. And that creates erasure. Right? That creates like this entire identity of people is gone. Like, okay, all Pakistani women probably wear shalwar kameez, or they wear a hijab, or that's the stereotype. So if you can somehow find your uniqueness within your family, within your friends, within your surroundings, start where you are, and elevate that uniqueness. That's, I think, is very important for any art director, any creative, any illustrator, filmmaker.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sana. Thank you for spending time with us and all of your insights, and going through your amazing work. We are so lucky to have you on this
This
show.
was so nice to talk about.
Of course. And thank you everyone for watching. Please follow Sana. She does incredible stuff. Her handle is Koinai, KOI_NAHI. We'll also link it in the comments and in YouTube and Instagram comments. And I will be back with another episode. Until then, Allah Hafiz.